Is this your daddy's trash? The man's words cracked across the sidewalk like a whip, as a little black girl bent down to pick up a fallen bottle beside a display table. No, sir, she said, raising her chin. That's his invention. A crowd had begun to gather on that buzzing corner of Lenox Avenue, where cars honked, shoes tapped the pavement, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows behind the food trucks. But it was the folding, table-wobbly, hand-painted with the words Eco Straws by Devin that drew the real attention. And beside it stood Devin, barely 23, in worn sneakers and a t-shirt that read, "We Build Us." He looked both out of place and oddly rooted. His table held bundles of plant-based straws, neatly packed in recycled paper sleeves. It should have been just another hopeful startup story. But New York didn't always work like that. The man who had spoken white, maybe in his late 50s, tailored in a gray suit that screamed money, gave a tight laugh. Invention? Honey, this is the sidewalk. If your daddy was serious, he wouldn't be out here like some bum. The girl flinched. She looked back at Devin, whose jaw tensed but eyes stayed fixed on the street ahead. I'm not her daddy, Devin said calmly. But she's right. That's my invention. The man scoffed. And what business school did you drop out of, genius? You know there are permits for this kind of thing. A woman nearby whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. The girl's name was Zaria. She was 8, wore pink overalls with little patches sewn onto the knees, and carried a notebook covered in glitter stickers. Her hair was done in tight, bouncing braids, and her backpack was too big for her frame. But her eyes, sharp, wide, brown, had none of the fragility her age suggested. She stepped forward between the man and Devin. You don't get to talk to him like that, she said. You didn't ask about his story. You just saw his skin. The man's smirk faltered. What did you say? Zaria didn't blink. You judge him 'cause he's black. Just like me. You didn't even look at his stuff. You only saw him. Someone nearby gasped. The woman with the whispered, "Oh my God," raised her phone and started recording. Devin moved to say something, but Zaria held up her hand. Let me, she said quietly. The man opened his mouth, perhaps to rebuke her, but now the crowd was watching. And New York crowds could get loud. A young Latina mom in scrubs called out, "She's right. That table looks cleaner than half the shops around here." Another voice, "Let the man speak." Devin finally looked at Zaria, surprised, then at the man. You know what hurts more than being called a bum, he said, voice steady. It's having your work ignored because it doesn't come in the right package, or the right skin. The man tried to laugh it off, but the crowd was shifting. Judging him now, Devin lifted one of the straws. These are biodegradable, made from leftover cornstalk fiber, no chemicals, no plastic. I've pitched this to investors, got ignored. We're told. We're not sure the market's ready. But then a white guy I knew copied it. Got seed money within 2 weeks. Zaria added, he tried to sell them at school last week. Said they were his. But Devin made them. There it was. The moment of collective pause. The weight of a truth too long buried under polite smiles and investor language. Someone said softly, "That's theft." Devin nodded. And erasure. The suited man was suddenly a shadow, disappearing into his own discomfort. He mumbled something about being late and slipped away. But the phone stayed on. So did the crowd. And Zaria, suddenly conscious of the attention, turned to Devin. You okay? He smiled. I am now. A woman in the crowd asked, where can I buy a pack? Devin blinked. Here. Or, I have a website. Well, it's kind of half working, but I'll post it, another said. Zaria beamed. I could draw you a new sign, one with like sparkles and stuff. He chuckled. That might help. More people came. More questions. Devin's table sold out in 20 minutes. Someone offered him a better folding stand. A journalist asked for an interview. An art teacher gave him a flyer for a community grant. But that wasn't the end. That was only the spark. Because the story didn't go viral just because it was heartwarming. It went viral because it was true. A week later, a video titled "Little Girl Destroys Racism in Under 30 Seconds" had 10 million views. Zaria, tiny and fierce, became an accidental spokesperson. But it was Devin's story that resonated deeper because in every Black community, there was a Devin. Someone brilliant, overlooked, passed over for being not quite right in boardrooms where whiteness was still currency. That truth rippled. Some tried to dismiss it. It's just a cute kid and a street vendor. But others knew better. Teachers assigned essays on implicit bias. Podcasts debated the barriers Black entrepreneurs face. A local station invited Devin on air. And when he showed up in the same scuffed sneakers, the host looked nervous. "You didn't want to dress up?" she asked too brightly. Devin smiled. "I came to talk about business. Not fashion." But it was Zaria who stole the show again. Sitting beside him in the studio, legs swinging from her chair, she said, "If people don't listen unless we wear suits, then maybe they're the ones not ready. Not us." Silence. Then applause. But behind all the buzz, there was a quieter truth. Zaria hadn't just been walking by that day. She had been looking for Devin. Because 2 weeks earlier, he'd come to her school. Not as a businessman, but as a janitor. He had wiped down her lunch table and smiled at her project on helping the earth. "I like your drawings," he'd said. "You think straws can save the planet?" She'd shrugged. "Maybe, if people start listening." He had paused. Maybe they need someone small to make them listen. She had remembered that. So when she saw him later on the street, struggling to sell the same straws she'd once drawn in her notebook, something clicked. And she'd stepped in. Not because she wanted to go viral, but because it was right. Because she knew what it felt like to be ignored, talked over, dismissed. Because at 8, Zaria already understood racism better than most adults did. And so she stood up, spoke out, and made the world listen. But the story wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Because while the cameras loved the moment, they didn't always love the truth that followed. The slow unraveling of how Devin had been sabotaged, of how his prototype had been stolen, of how his own high school counselor had told him, "You're not Stanford material." Because racism doesn't just shout. Sometimes it whispers, nods, skips your name on the list, smiles while it shuts the door. And Devin? He'd lived that. But now he had a platform, thanks to a little girl who refused to stay quiet. And the truth she helped uncover was about to shake the city from its polished surface all the way down to its trembling roots. The next morning, Devin sat on the edge of a plastic chair in the Bronx Community Business Center, heart pounding. The room smelled like old coffee and printer ink. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. He wore the only button-down shirt he owned, wrinkled but clean, and clutched a folder stuffed with product sketches, expense sheets, and a hastily written mission statement that read, "Eco Straws, building a future without waste, starting with us." Across the table, a middle-aged Black woman in a crimson blazer flipped through his papers with interest. Her nameplate read S.L. Whitaker, Small Business Grant Review Committee. "I watched that video," she said, tapping a printout of the clip where Zaria stood up to the man in the suit. "She reminded me of my daughter when she was 8. Brave, fierce, and way too smart for adults' nonsense." Devin smiled nervously. "She saved me." Whitaker looked up, sharp eyes meeting his. "No, you saved yourself. She just reminded the rest of us to look." She sat back. "Now tell me what you do with this grant if you get it." He took a breath. "Buy proper materials. Build an online store. Pay a web developer. Maybe get into eco fairs and street festivals. But more than anything, I'd hire kids from the neighborhood. Train them to make, pack, and ship. Give them something to believe in." Silence lingered. Finally, she nodded. "You'll hear back soon." When he stepped outside, The street was noisy with life. A saxophonist playing under the train tracks, a vendor frying empanadas on the corner, two kids chasing each other with neon blue slushies in hand. Devin exhaled. Something felt different. Not lighter, but more possible. He hadn't told anyone, but part of him feared the moment would pass, that the media buzz would fade, and he'd return to mopping school hallways while his invention collected dust. But Zarya wasn't letting that happen. Back at her apartment, in a two-bedroom walk-up she shared with her mom and little brother, Zarya was drawing again. This time it was a comic book, Devin the Eco-Hero. In panel 1, he stood on a pile of plastic trash, fists on hips. In panel 2, his straws flew out like arrows, knocking away pollution. Her mom peeked over her shoulder. "He looks taller in your drawings." Zarya grinned. "He's tall inside." That afternoon, Devin returned to the corner of Lenox Avenue. This time, his table was twice as wide. A woman from the community center had donated a collapsible canopy. A friend printed a vinyl banner with his logo, and beside the cash box sat a handwritten sign, "As seen on TV and in your heart." Zarya's idea, of course. By 4 p.m., a small crowd had formed again, but this time no one asked if he had a permit. Instead, a white man in a tech company hoodie approached sheepishly, holding his phone. "Are you the guy from the viral video?" Devin nodded. The man extended a hand. "My name's Owen. I work at Green Lab Ventures. We saw the footage. Would you be open to a meeting?" Devin hesitated. "I've had meetings," he said slowly. "They don't always go well." "I get it," Owen said. "We're not trying to steal anything. I promise. Just let us hear you out." Devin took the card. "I'll think about it." Later that week, Zarya stood at the front of her third-grade class, holding up one of Devin's straws. Her teacher, Ms. Levin, had asked the students to do a hero presentation. Most kids talk about LeBron or Beyoncé. Zarya talked about a janitor-turned-inventor. "He showed me that even if people don't listen at first, you keep going. And sometimes you gotta be loud until they hear you." Her classmates clapped. Ms. Levin wiped a tear, but not everyone was clapping. At the back of the room, Principal Henderson White, stiff, with horn-rimmed glasses, watched with tight lips. He'd already received 3 media inquiries about Zarya's involvement in the protest on Lenox. One headline read, "Third-grade girls' school's Wall Street bigot on racism." He didn't like it. That afternoon, Zarya's mom got a call. "We think Zarya is distracted," Henderson said. "Too much attention. Perhaps it's affecting her studies." Her mom narrowed her eyes. She just aced her science test. "Still, we're considering adjusting her classroom environment." "Is that code for punishment?" her mother snapped. "Not at all. We simply want to redirect her focus." When she hung up, Zarya's mom looked at her daughter. "You keep being you, okay? Let them worry about their focus." Zarya nodded, but something about the call lingered. Meanwhile, Devin sat in a glass conference room in downtown Manhattan. Across from him were 3 men in Patagonia vests and a woman in all-white linen. It was the Green Lab Ventures team. The walls gleamed. A receptionist offered sparkling water. The table was walnut. The air smelled like eucalyptus. "We think there's real potential here," Owen said. "Your story is powerful, and the product's actually good." Devin leaned in. "So what's the catch?" "No catch. Just conditions. We'd rebrand. Make the name more scalable. You get a brand ambassador. A logo refresh. Maybe change the face on the site to someone with broader appeal." "Broader?" "Market-friendly. Relatable." "You mean white?" Silence. The woman in linen cleared her throat. "Let's not make this political." "It already is," Devin said. "I'm not changing my face to fit your pitch deck." Owen looked embarrassed. "We're just saying the idea could go farther with some adjustments." "I'm not looking to go farther," Devin said. "I'm looking to go forward." "As me?" He stood up. Thanks for the water. When he walked out, his hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. That night, he posted a video, him speaking directly to his phone camera. No music, no edits. They wanted to fund the straw, he said, but not the story. Not me. That's not a partnership. That's a disguise. It was raw, honest, and it went viral again. In classrooms across the country, teachers played clips of Zaria and Devin as part of social justice units. A library in Detroit started a campaign called Small Voices Big Change. Colleges reached out, offering speaking engagements. A nonprofit created a mentorship fund for young Black entrepreneurs and named it the Zaria Grant. But the deeper impact was harder to see, yet more powerful. A kid in South Carolina used Devin's idea to launch his own compostable cup startup. A teacher in Oregon rewrote her syllabus to include a unit on systemic bias in business. And in Devin's own neighborhood, kids stopped seeing him as the janitor. They saw him as the guy who didn't sell out. One day, a teen knocked on his door. "You don't know me," he said, "but I saw your video. I want to help. I know Photoshop." Devin smiled. "Come in. We'll build this together." Zaria kept drawing. Her comic book now had 3 issues. One was titled The Suit Man Returns, where the villain tried to steal the city's ideas again, but this time, every kid stood in his way. She printed them at the local library and gave them out for free. Some went to reporters. One ended up in a city council member's inbox, which led to the next unexpected event. A letter, embossed and official, arrived at Devin's apartment. City Hall request for testimony public hearing on minority-owned small business barriers. Devin stared at the letter, then at Zaria's drawing pinned to his wall. Him, arms outstretched, straws flying like wings. He texted her mom, "Is Zaria free next Thursday?" The day of the hearing, the council chamber was packed. Most people there were polished, practiced, lobbyists in suits, Chamber of Commerce reps, a few small business owners in modest attire. Then came Devin, in a hoodie that read, "We Build Us," and beside him, in a bright yellow dress with sequins on the collar, was Zaria. When he stepped up to the mic, the room quieted. "My name is Devin Brooks," he began. "I'm the founder of EcoStraws, and I'm also the product of a system that almost erased me before I began." He told his story, the invention, the rejections, the theft, the sidewalk, the child who changed everything. Then he stepped aside. Zaria took the mic. "I'm only 8, she said, "but I know when something's unfair. And I know that Devin shouldn't have had to sell his straws on the street just 'cause of his skin." Her voice didn't shake. She looked straight at the council. "You're the grown-ups. You're supposed to fix it." The room erupted in applause. Even a few council members stood. After the hearing, reporters swarmed them. Devin lifted Zaria up on his shoulders. She laughed and threw up 2 fingers in a peace sign. Later that week, the city passed a motion to allocate more funding and visibility to minority-owned microbusinesses. But more than policy, it had sparked a conversation across the city. Not everyone liked it. Some said it was too much politics. Others said, they're just using the girl for attention. But Zaria kept drawing. Devin kept building. Because they knew this wasn't about attention. It was about truth. The buzz slowly evolved from headlines to homework, from viral clips to classroom posters. Zaria's face was now printed on a school mural, hand-painted by local artists, entitled, "Voice of the Future." Devin's EcoStraws were being sold in 2 local co-ops and a small cafe in Harlem. But the world was still watching, and not always kindly. On a cold Monday morning, just as things seemed to be taking flight, the backlash arrived. Devin walked into a neighborhood cafe where he'd just finalized a display deal, and on the counter was a tabloid-style magazine with the headline, "Fake Hero. Viral straw seller has criminal record." His stomach dropped. The article was thin, full of vague accusations. It referenced a minor shoplifting incident from when he was 17, one he'd long since resolved through youth diversion program. But the damage was done. The story implied deception, opportunism, manipulation. By noon, the cafe called to pause the product launch. By 3 p.m., the grant committee left a voicemail. Given recent press coverage, we're re-evaluating the distribution of funds. And by 6 p.m., a new headline trended on Twitter. Was the little girl duped? Questions surround EcoStraw's founder. Devin shut off his phone. Zaria's mom called, furious. They think one mistake makes a man unworthy of redemption. But Devin just sat on his apartment floor, staring at the prototype in his hands. The same prototype that had kept him up late for weeks, glued and sealed with patience and faith. Suddenly, it felt like paper. Zaria showed up that evening, her backpack bouncing against her side. She didn't knock. She just walked in and stood beside him. I saw the news, she said. Devin didn't look up. They're not wrong, he mumbled. I did steal. One time, 7 years ago. I was hungry. She sat beside him, legs crossed. You also apologized. And fixed it. He said nothing. She pulled a folded drawing from her pocket. It was of a knight in armor, holding a straw like a sword. Even heroes get dents, she whispered. But they still fight. A knock came at the door. It was Mr. Jimenez, the owner of the bodega downstairs. I saw the story, he said. Bullshit. You were always kind to my wife. Always helped kids with their projects. We still carry your straws. Anyone don't like it, they can shop somewhere else. Devin blinked. You sure? Mr. Jimenez nodded. We don't throw away our own. That night, Zaria and Devin recorded another video. Zaria began. They're saying he's not a hero because he messed up when he was a kid. But I mess up all the time, and I still get second chances. Then Devin, calmly. If the world can't make space for people who fall and get back up, then we're all in trouble. Yes, I made a mistake when I was 17. I also started a business, mentored kids, and built something from nothing. So which one tells you more about me? It wasn't flashy, but it struck deep. By morning, their post had over 2 million views. More importantly, it sparked a counterwave. Activists began posting with the hashtag, "Past is not the whole story." Former teachers came forward to defend Devin's character. Parents whose kids he'd helped shared testimonials. Even the cafe reversed its decision after public outcry, releasing a statement that read, "We believe in growth and redemption." Still, the real shift came from somewhere no one expected. A woman named Janice Turner, a white investor who had originally ignored Devin's pitch 2 years ago, posted an open apology on LinkedIn. I didn't listen, not because the product wasn't good, but because I didn't expect innovation to come from someone who looked like him. I was wrong, and I want to be better. It went viral, and suddenly, the conversation shifted again from doubt to introspection. More media outlets started covering the original theft, the white entrepreneur who copied Devin's idea. Journalists dug into the disparities in venture capital funding for Black founders. Schools invited Devin and Zaria to speak not as a gimmick, but as curriculum. One morning, Devin walked into his old high school. Principal Jernigan, who once told him he was not Stanford material, looked stunned. "You. Saw you on CNN," he muttered. Devin smiled. "I'm here for career day." He entered a classroom filled with black and brown students, some in oversized hoodies, some half asleep. He stepped up, held up a straw, and said, "I was told I'd never amount to much. That this," he held the straw higher, "was a pipe dream. But guess what? I didn't need permission to matter. I just needed a reason." A hand shot up. "How'd you keep going?" He paused. "Because one little girl told me the world needed to listen, and I believed her." Zaria, seated in the front row that day, grinned wide. After the talk, a quiet boy with glasses approached. "I want to invent something," he whispered, "but my dad says it's dumb." Devin knelt. "You invent it anyway." A few days later, Zaria received a letter at home. It was from a girl in Montana. "I saw your videos," it said. "My teacher says I'm too loud. But maybe being loud is good when it's about something that matters. Thank you for being loud." Zaria pinned the letter next to her drawings. Meanwhile, Devin received word from the Bronx Small Business Committee. The grant was his. The reevaluation had passed, and they were adding an additional $5,000 to cover mentorship programming based on his impact. But the biggest surprise came in the form of a partnership request. Not from a tech company, not from a sponsor, from the Harlem Public School District. "We'd like to provide your eco straws in all our cafeterias," the letter read. "We also want you to run a monthly workshop from idea to impact for our middle school students." Devin blinked. That night, he stood again on Lenox Avenue, next to his now permanent street stall rebuilt into a mobile cart with signage designed by Zaria and others. Kids waved as they passed. A teenager played guitar nearby, his open case filled with change and paper hearts. Zaria sat beside him on a crate. "So what's next?" she asked. Devin looked out at the street, the city, the noise, the life. "We build more," he said. "We teach more. We lift more. And we don't wait for permission." She nodded, then added quietly, "We stay loud." He smiled. "We stay loud." It was spring when the first official shipment of eco straws entered the Harlem Public School District's warehouse. Cardboard boxes labeled, "Made with Purpose," stacked floor to ceiling. Each one carefully packed by hand in a community-run workspace Devin had built from a repurposed bakery. He didn't do it alone. There were kids from local schools, seniors from the community center, two mothers who used to be out of work, and even a man named Charles who had once mocked Devin on the street. Now, Charles folded packing slips with quiet care. "This is better than shouting on sidewalks," Charles muttered one day. Devin grinned. "You're still shouting, just with your hands." Across town, Zaria was preparing for something even bigger, her first speech outside New York. She had been invited to speak at the National Youth Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. It was a conference for young changemakers across the country. The youngest speaker before her had been 11. Zaria was still 8. Her mom helped her pick out a bright blue dress and brushed her braids into a crown. Devin flew with them, not as a guest, but as her guest. On the train ride, she rehearsed lines from her notebook. "When people ask me why I stood up for Devin," she read out loud, "I say, why didn't you?" Devin chuckled. That one's a mic drop. They arrived at the auditorium, a space filled with future engineers, writers, environmental activists. And there, at the center of it all, stood a podium just slightly taller than Zaria herself. When she took the stage, the room fell silent. She looked so small behind the microphone until she spoke. "My name is Zaria James. I'm 8 years old. I love drawing comics, science projects, and helping people who deserve better." She paused, looking down at her notes. But then she put them aside. "I didn't come here to be cute," she said. "I came here because too many people think kids can't change anything. And too many grown-ups wait until it's too late." She told the story about Devin, about the sidewalk, about standing up even when you're shaking inside. "They told Devin he didn't belong," she said. "They tried to erase his voice. But I knew he had something important. And sometimes it takes someone small to remind the world to look again." Thunderous applause followed. And somewhere in the back of the room, a woman who worked for a national education nonprofit wiped away tears. 2 weeks later, Zaria's speech was aired on PBS under the series Voices Rising. Schools across the country began assigning it in social studies classes. Teachers invited students to submit their own Speak Up projects. A girl in Arizona wrote about her father being deported. A boy in Maine spoke about being native and feeling invisible. Zarya had started something bigger than a Momench-lit movement. Meanwhile, Devin's business kept growing. A mid-sized eco-brand approached him for a licensing partnership this time, with no attempt to erase his identity, no suggestion to change the face. Instead, they wanted him to lead a national youth mentorship program through their foundation. Devin accepted on one condition. The program would be named after Zarya. The Zarya Initiative, when young voices lead. He stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the new warehouse, dressed in his familiar hoodie, now branded with the logo Zarya herself had drawn, a straw forming a fist. Reporters came, city officials too. Even the mayor stopped by for a photo. But when the cameras left, Devin found himself staring at the walls in silence. "I didn't think it would ever get this far," he whispered to Zarya, who was munching on a bag of gummy bears beside him. She shrugged. "It got this far because you didn't stop, even when people were mean, even when you wanted to quit." Then she looked up at him, eyes full of something heavier than her age. "You can't quit now either." He didn't. Months passed, then a year. Zarya turned 9. She spoke at 3 more conferences, helped edit a children's book titled The Girl Who Got Loud, and was featured in Time magazine's top 30 under 30 list despite not even being 10. Devin's business scaled statewide. Eco straws were now used in school districts, local cafes, and even some airports. But he refused to leave Harlem. His headquarters remained where it began in the heart of a community that had once seen him only as a janitor. The truth, though, was never forgotten. Every new building, every opportunity, every expansion carried the memory of where it began: a sidewalk, a table, and a little girl who refused to be silent. But even happy stories have moments of pause. One day, nearly 2 years after that first encounter, Devin visited Zarya's school unannounced. He'd just secured a grant to fund environmental STEM programs in urban districts, and he wanted to tell her first. But Zarya wasn't in class. Her teacher looked up from her desk. "She's at the hospital. Her little brother Jammery got sick." Devin froze. "What happened?" "Something with his lungs. They're still running tests." He left immediately. At the hospital, Zarya was curled on a waiting room bench, her spark dimmed but not out. "They said it's from mold," she whispered. "In our apartment." Devin sat beside her. "He's going to be okay." She nodded, but her voice was low. "We told the landlord. For months. He never fixed it." Devin's hands clenched. "We'll fix it now." The next day, he called a city council member he'd met during the Eco Straws hearings. Within 48 hours, a city inspection team visited the building. The apartment was declared unlivable. The landlord was fined. Zarya's family was moved to a clean, safe unit just 3 blocks away, still close to school, still close to Devin's warehouse. But the moment changed something in both of them. Devin realized his mission wasn't just straws. It was justice. And Zarya, though shaken, returned to school with even sharper fire. When asked to write a personal essay for her 5th grade application to an advanced program, she titled it, "When Grown-Ups Stop Listening, Kids Have to Get Loud Again." She got in. In the final months of that year, Devin launched a new campaign, Build Us Better. It focused on empowering young leaders to not only start businesses, but to speak truth in broken systems. The first video featured Zarya older now, still fierce. "I don't want to be famous," she said in the clip. "I want to be effective." And she was. By the time Zarya turned 10, she had co-founded a nonprofit with Devin, partnered with 2 youth climate coalitions, and had her comics published in national bookstores. But she still carried her original notebook. Inside, the first page read, "Devin equals real-life superhero." And on the last page, "The world changed because we stayed loud." One afternoon, as they stood in front of a packed middle school auditorium for yet another event, Devin looked at her and said, One day, you won't need me at all. Zarya smirked. You say that like I ever did. They laughed. The crowd cheered. And as they stepped onto the stage side by side, mentor and warrior, builder and spark, they knew this wasn't ending. It was a legacy, one built not on attention, but on action, not on sympathy, but on solidarity, not on permission, but on power. And at the heart of it all, a girl who dared to get loud, and a man who finally got heard. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.